The party was for my son. The whole yard smelled of cut grass and lighter fluid and money. 30 people stood on his new stone patio above the lake, holding glasses they had not paid for, and my son raised his own glass and pointed it at me like a man pointing at a chair. "What would you know about sacrifice, Dad?" he said. He said it loud, loud enough for the caterers to hear. "You fixed furnaces for 40 years. Some of them laughed. Most of them, if I am honest. It is an easy thing to laugh at, an old man in a pressed shirt who smells faintly of a basement. I did not laugh. I did not do anything. I had been letting that particular joke land for a long time. Then a man I did not know set down his glass. He was old like me, silver all through his hair, standing near the window where the light was going soft on the water. He had been quiet all evening. Now he stood up straight, the way a body remembers to stand before the mind decides to, and he did not sit back down. He looked at my son, then he looked at me, and he said the thing that stopped the yard. "Sir, do they know who you are?" Sir, to me, in front of everybody. I had spent 50 years making sure they never had to know. 50 years of being the man who kept the lights on and the pipes warm and his mouth shut. But I am getting ahead of myself. My name is Wayne Boyd. I am 74 years old, retired, a widower. I live in Corley, Indiana, in the same brick house I have lived in since 1974. And in this town, I am the man who used to fix your furnace. That is the whole of it, as far as most people know. Boyd Heating and Cooling. One van, one name on the door, 40 years of crawl spaces and cold mornings. If your pilot went out in January, you called me. I came. That was my life, and I want to tell you plainly, it was a good one. I drive a green pickup with a bad door. I keep a dog named Rooster who is mostly asleep. On Thursdays, I take my coffee at the diner on 2nd Street, black, because my wife used to say a man who needs sugar in his coffee needs sugar in his spine, and she said it just to watch me drink it black. Her name was Vivian. She has been gone 5 years now. Cancer, the slow, patient kind that takes the person before it takes the body. She died in the spring when the crocuses she planted came up anyway, without asking her, the way flowers do. The house is quiet without her. Her recliner is still by the window with the coffee stain on the left arm that I never got out and never wanted to. On the shelf above the television, there is a blue coffee tin, the kind they stopped making, and I do not open it. I know what is in it. That is enough. Vivian knew what was in it too. She was the only one. Every Thursday, I sit across from Gus Tremaine, who is a year older than me and twice as stubborn. Gus and I go back further than anyone in this town knows. We do not talk about the far back part. We talk about his knees and my hearing and whether the diner has changed the pie. But sometimes, near the bottom of the cup, he will get quiet and he will look at me over his glasses and he will ask the same thing. "You still keeping it in a coffee can, Wayne?" "Where else would I keep it?" I say. "On the wall, maybe, like a normal person." "I was never a normal person, Gus. Neither were you." He laughs at that. It is the only kind of laughing we do about it. 2 old men and a can on a shelf. I want you to know I was good at my work. That matters to me, so I will say it. A furnace is an honest machine. It does not lie to you, and it does not care who you are. And if you listen to it long enough, it will tell you exactly what is wrong. I could stand in a basement in the dark and hear a bad blower motor the way a doctor hears a bad heart. I could put my hand flat on a cold register and know whether the trouble was the pilot or the thermocouple or the exchanger before I ever pulled a panel. The exchanger is the one that used to keep me up at night, in the good way, the responsible way. A cracked heat exchanger will put carbon monoxide into a house so quiet that a whole family goes to sleep and does not wake up and never knows it was coming. I found more than one in 40 years. I condemned furnaces that people begged me to just patch because I would not gamble somebody's children on a customer's Christmas budget. When old Mrs. Dietrich could not pay, one January when her pipes were near to bursting, I fixed her heat and wrote the bill for $1 and told her it was a special. She knew it was not a special. She made me a pie every winter after that until the winter she passed. That is the man they saw, the furnace man, the one who never did anything. And for most of my life I let that picture stand because a picture like that is a kind of peace, and I had earned my peace the hard way, and I did not feel like explaining how. I should tell you about the small cuts. They did not start with the party. They almost never do. They started after Vivian died. That is the truth of it. While she was alive, she kept the shape of me in the room. She would say, "Ask your father, he knows things." And Brett would roll his eyes, but he would ask. When she was gone, the asking stopped. It was as if the one person who remembered I was worth a question had taken the question with her. My son is named Brett. He is 47 years old, and he is good at things I never understood. Spreadsheets and clients, and a kind of talking that fills a room without saying much. He manages other people's money, and he manages it well, and he wanted very badly to be a partner at his firm. I understood the wanting. I did not understand what it made him do to the small things around him, the way a man clearing land does not think much about the trees. I was one of the trees. It was little at first. He would introduce me at his dinners and reach for the softest word. "This is my dad. He did maintenance." Maintenance. Once at a client dinner he brought me to because his mother had just died and he did not want to look heartless. He put his hand on my shoulder and said, "Dad kept the lights on. HVAC. Right, Pop?" And he squeezed my shoulder the way you squeeze a child's. And the table smiled at me the way you smile at a child. And I said, "That's right," because it was. And because a man does not correct his son in front of strangers 3 weeks after the funeral. There was the matter of the toolbox, too. It was my father's before it was mine. A steel box worn smooth at the handle by 2 men's hands over 70 years. When Brett bought the new house, he was clearing out the garage of my old things he had been storing, and I found the toolbox out at the curb with the trash on a Tuesday for the truck. He said he thought it was junk. He said it kindly, which was worse. I put it in the truck bed, and I did not say a word, and I have it still, in my own garage, oiled where it belongs. Vivian would not have let it get to the curb. That is the thing I kept coming back to. While she was alive, she was the keeper of what mattered in our family. And what mattered to her was not the size of a thing, but the weight of it. She knew which box on which shelf held which life. When she died, it was as if the map went with her, and the rest of us were left holding a house full of things we no longer knew how to read. He hid the van. That one, I will admit, stung. When I would drive up to his house, the green pickup with Boyd heating and cooling still faintly on the door, he would come out fast and say, "Park around back, Dad, the neighbors," and laugh like it was a joke we were both in on. I parked around back. It was his house. A man parks where he is asked. But the one that stayed with me happened at a Sunday dinner. My granddaughter Piper was 6 then. She is 8 now, and she is the best thing any of us ever made. A serious little person with her grandmother's way of looking straight at you. She had been learning about soldiers in school, the way children do around the fall holidays, and she turned to me with her fork in the air, and she asked me, plain as water, "Grandpa, did you ever be brave?" The table went a little quiet, the way tables do when a child asks a real question. And before I could find the right size of answer, Brett laughed and said, "Grandpa peeled potatoes, sweetheart. Somebody had to feed the heroes." Everybody chuckled. Paige, my son's wife, did not. She looked down at her plate, and something crossed her face that I have thought about many times since. Paige is a kind woman, married to a man in a hurry. She sees more than she says. I could have told Piper the truth. I want you to know I thought about it. I looked at that little girl waiting on her grandfather, and I felt the whole weight of the coffee tin pressing down through the ceiling from the shelf where it sat. Instead, I said, "Everybody's brave once, honey. If they're lucky, just once." "When were you brave?" she asked. "That's a story for when you're bigger," I said. I did not tell her when mine was. That was my choice, and I made it the way I had made it 1,000 times. And I told myself it was the kind choice, the humble choice, the choice a good man makes. I am not sure anymore that it was. There is a difference between humility and hiding, and I had spent 50 years pretending I did not know which one I was doing. Here is the part I did not see coming, and it is the part that changed everything. 2 days before the party, Brett called and asked me to drop off a lamp he had left at my place. One of Vivian's old lamps he suddenly wanted, now that his house had rooms to fill. I drove it over. I came up the side, the way I was trained to by then, around back. Quiet. A man who fixes things, learning to enter like the help. His kitchen window was open behind the screen. He was on the phone, pacing, and he did not hear me come up the walk. He was talking to Paige. "Just keep him in the corner," he said. "Put him by the window with a plate and he'll be happy. The general's old school, Paige. He's the whole account. If Dad gets going about heat pumps, or the war or whatever, I am finished. I mean it. This is the biggest fish I have ever had on the line, and I am not losing it because my father wants to tell someone about a thermocouple." I stood on the walk with a lamp in my hands. Then he laughed, and he said the thing that I carried out to the truck. He said, "Watch, I'll do the furnace bit. It kills. 40 years of furnaces. People love it." The furnace bit. My whole working life, the honest labor I was proud of, my son had turned into a bit. A rehearsed joke. He had scheduled my humiliation the way he scheduled everything, and he had scheduled it in front of a man he wanted to impress. I set the lamp on the back step. I did not knock. I got in the truck and I did not start it for a while. I want to tell you something about that quiet. For 50 years, my silence had cost only me. I had decided, back when I was young and full of things I could not say, that I would carry it and not make anyone else carry it with me. That was mine to spend, and I spent it, and I did not regret it. But that night, sitting in the drive with the lamp on the step behind me, I understood that my silence had finally cost somebody else. It had cost a 6-year-old girl a grandfather worth asking about. It had let my son believe a lie so completely that he built a joke out of it and aimed it at me for money. Vivian's voice came to me then. It does that. She said what she always said, the thing that used to make me furious and now just makes me miss her. She said, "Let them find out on their own, Wayne. They always do." I started the truck. I decided to go to the party, not to fight, not to win anything, just to be there, standing where I always stood and to let whatever happened happen. I went to see Gus first, because a man should not decide something like that alone. We sat on his porch with 2 cans of something cold, and I told him what I had heard through the screen. Gus is not a soft man. He was quiet a long time, longer than the story needed, and then he said the thing I needed and did not want. "You don't owe that boy a war story," he said. "You never owed anybody that. But Wayne, you don't owe him your silence either. Those aren't the only 2 things you can do." "What's the third thing?" I said. "Go," he said. "Stand where you always stood. Don't perform and don't hide. If the truth wants to come out that night, let it come out on its own legs. It's earned the right to walk." He looked at the lake for a while. "The men we carried," he said, "they don't need you to win an argument with your kid. But they might not mind being remembered out loud one time before we're both gone. Did you ever think of that? You keep them in a can. Maybe they'd like some air." I did not answer him. But I drove home thinking about air. The whole way back, I thought about the difference between humility and hiding, which is a thing I had never let myself look at straight. Humility is when you know what you are, and you choose to sit low anyway, so the light can fall on someone else. Hiding is when you sit low because you are afraid of what standing up will cost you, or cost the people you are protecting, or cost the memory of the men you cannot bear to see reduced to a party trick. I had told myself for 50 years that I was being humble. Somewhere on that dark county road, I understood that at least half of it, maybe more, had just been hiding, and that I had taught my son to see a small man because a small man was easier for both of us to carry. That night I did a thing I had not done in years. I took the blue tin down off the shelf and I set it on the kitchen table and I opened it. Inside was a folded citation, going soft at the creases. A St. Christopher medal on a broken chain that Vivian had worn and then given back to me when I could not sleep. And a photograph, black and white, 4 young men squinting into a sun that was 55 years ago now. 4 of us. I could still hear all four voices. I can hear them now. Three of them did not come home. That is the whole story when you take everything else away. I was 19 years old and the world came apart, and I did a thing that I have never been able to feel proud of the way you are supposed to feel proud. Because being alive to receive the thanks means the other men are not. That is a kind of arithmetic that never balances. I did not take the metal out of the tin. I want you to understand that. I have never once worn it, but I took the photograph. I put the four of them in my shirt pocket over the heart, where I have kept them my whole life anyway. That's who I answer to, I told the empty kitchen, not the room. You four. I ironed my one good shirt, and I found out, almost by accident, who the general was. Vivian used to keep a small stack of mailings from the society, the association of men who had received the same thing I had. She kept them because I would not. She said someday I would want them, and she was wrong about the someday, but right about the keeping. That night, looking for a clean collar stay, I found the old envelope in the sideboard, and there on a reunion program from a year I never attended was a list of names, and among them one I recognized. Cade, Russell Cade, Major General, retired. The biggest fish my son had ever had on the line was a man who had stood in a room with me once, a long time ago, in a company of men who had all done the same impossible thing and come out the other side of it strange and quiet and marked. I had shaken his hand. He had shaken mine. We had not needed to say a word, because there was nothing to say that both of us did not already carry. I sat at the table a long time with that program. I could have called Brett. I could have said, "Son, do you have any idea who you invited?" I did not. Some rooms you only enter once, and you do not enter them to be proved right. I decided I would go, and I would stand in the corner if that was where I was put, and I would keep my four men in my pocket, and I would let the evening find its own legs, exactly as Gus had said. The morning of the party, Brett texted me the seating. He actually sent a little map. My name was a box near the window, in the corner. He wrote, "Best spot, Dad. Great view of the water." He was not even lying to himself anymore. He had stopped being able to tell. I put on the good shirt. I put the photograph in the pocket. I drove the green truck and I parked it around back without being asked, because after a while you save people the trouble. Then I walked up into my son's party to be a joke, and I let it happen. It was a beautiful evening. I will give him that. Brett has an eye for a beautiful evening. Little lights strung over the patio, the lake going pink and then gray, waiters with trays, a good crowd of the kind of people my son wanted to be. Paige met me at the top of the steps and held onto my arm a second longer than a greeting needs. She said, low, "I'm glad you came, Wayne." She did not look glad. She looked like a woman standing between two things. Piper found me and hugged my legs and told me a long story about a frog. And I listened to all of it, because a story about a frog from an 8-year-old is worth more than most of what gets said at a party like that. Then Brett called her away, and I went to my box by the window, and I watched. I watched my son work the general. You could see it from across the patio, the way Brett leaned in and laughed too soon and touched the older man's elbow. General Cade was polite. He was old school, just as Brett had said, a straight-backed, quiet man who let other people fill the silences and watch them do it. He did not look impressed. He looked like a man being circled and patient about it, the way you get patient about a thing when you have seen the real version and can spot the copy. I did not go near him. I want that on the record. I stayed in my corner with a plate I did not eat. I was not there to be recognized. I had made my peace with the corner a long time ago. Then Brett gathered the room for the toast. He tapped his glass. He thanked everyone for coming. He talked about the firm and the partnership and how far he had come, and I stood by the window and felt the old familiar smallness settle over me like a coat I had worn so long I forgot it was a coat. And then he turned to me to make his point about how far he had come. He turned to me the way you turned to the before to show off the after. "My old man taught me the value of work," he said, warming up, playing the room. "He surely did. Wayne Boyd, furnaces." A few chuckles primed. "And listen, I love this guy. But what would you know about sacrifice, Dad? He grinned. He looked at the general when he said it, checking the fish. You fixed furnaces for 40 years. There it was. The bit. And it killed just like he said it would. The patio laughed. I looked at my plate. I had promised myself I would not perform, and I would not, and I did not. And into the laughing, I heard a glass being set down on a table. Not hard, just final. General Russell Cade stood up. He stood the way we were all taught to stand once and never fully unlearn. And the laughing died because a room can feel a thing like that before it understands it. He did not look at Brett. He looked across the patio at the furnace man in the corner by the window, and his face did something I have only seen on the faces of men who were there. It went still and young and terribly sad all at once. Sir, he said, to me, do they know who you are? Nobody moved. Brett laughed, a small, confused laugh, the sound of a man whose joke has fallen into deep water. General, that's just my dad. He's retired. He did HVAC. Cade did not seem to hear him. He set down his napkin and he walked across his host's beautiful patio, past the strung lights and the tray of little crab things, and he stopped in front of me. Up close, he was older than the water had let him look. His eyes were wet, and he was not ashamed of it. Corporal Boyd, he said, and I said the only thing there was to say, which was his name, quiet, the way you say a name in a church. General Cade. He turned to the room then. He did not raise his voice. He did not have to. When a man like that speaks quietly, everybody leans in to catch it, and everybody did. Some of you laughed just now, he said. I understand. You didn't know. So let me tell you, so that no one in this yard ever laughs at this man again. He looked at Brett when he said the next part. Just once. When your father was 19 years old, he said, his position was overrun. He was hit, twice. He carried 3 wounded men, one at a time, across open ground to cover, and then he went back out for a 4th. He held a line that 4 grown men could not have held, alone, until the wounded could be lifted out. The reason a number of men are grandfathers today, the reason some of you exist at all, is that a 19-year-old furnace repairman from Indiana decided he was not going to leave. The patio was so quiet, I could hear the lake. Your country gave your father the highest thing it has to give, Cade said, the Medal of Honor. There are very few men alive who wear it. I am a general, and in the presence of that medal I stand, and I say, sir, and so does every soldier who understands what it cost. You do not put this man in a corner. His voice did not break, but it bent. You stand when he comes into the room. 30 people learned in 10 seconds what my son had not thought to ask in 40 years. I felt the whole yard turn and look at me. Not at the furnace man, at whoever I had been the whole time, standing right there where they could have asked. And I did the thing I had come to do, though I had not known until that moment that I had come to do it. I reached into my shirt pocket and I took out the photograph, the 4 young men and the old son, and I held it up just enough for the front row to see. He's kind, I said, and my voice came out steadier than I expected. The general is a kind man and everything he said is true, but I want to say the true part he left out. I looked at the picture. The brave ones did not come home. These 3. I came home. All I ever did was carry the receipt for what they paid. Nobody said anything. Piper had come to stand against my leg. She was looking up at me with her grandmother's straight look, and she was not confused at all. Children understand this kind of thing faster than we do. I put the photograph back over my heart. That, I said, quiet to the yard, is what I know about sacrifice. Silence. The good kind and the terrible kind at once. The party did not really recover, and it did not need to. People came up to me, one at a time, the way they do, not sure whether to shake my hand or apologize, and I let them do whichever they needed. A woman told me her father had been a Marine and had never said a word about it either, and now he was gone, and she would never get to ask, and she held my hand too long, and I let her. That is the other half of a night like that. For every man who hid, there is somebody left wishing they had asked in time. General Cade stayed near me the rest of the evening. He never did talk to Brett about the account. Some things a man decides without saying he has decided them. Near the end, we stood by the water together, two old men and a lake, and he said, "You could have let me sit there. You could have let that boy have his joke and kept your quiet. Why did you come tonight, Wayne?" I told him the truth. I told him I had a granddaughter who deserved a grandfather worth asking about, and that I was too old to keep spending my silence on somebody else's comfort. He nodded a long time. "The four of them would be glad," he said. "You never could take the thanks. Maybe let the girl give it to you, that's allowed." I have thought about that more than almost anything else anyone said that night. Later, when the lights were coming down and the caterers were carrying trays back to the vans, I found my son in his big new kitchen, alone, standing at the counter with both hands flat on the stone, like a man holding a boat to a dock. He did not turn around at first. "Why didn't you ever tell me?" he said. His voice was wrecked. I thought about it. I owed him a real answer, not a soft one. "Because you never asked me a question I couldn't answer with a wrench," I said. "For 40 years. And I let you not ask, because it was easier for me too. I'm not going to stand here and pretend this was all on you, Brett. A man who hides a thing that long is hiding for his own reasons. But you built a joke out of me and pointed it at a stranger for money. That part is yours." He turned around, my son, 47 years old, and his face was the face he had at 6 when he broke something he loved and did not know how to say so. "Dad," he said. He could not get further than that. He reached out and grabbed my sleeve, my forearm, the way a drowning man grabs, and he could not get a single other word out. I let him hold on. Then I put my other hand over his and I held it still, the way you steady a thing that is shaking, and I took his hand off my arm gently. "That's enough," I said. "Sit down, son." He sat. I did not destroy him. I want you to understand that I could have. There is a version of that night where I take everything. The respect he wanted, the account, the picture he had built of himself, and I burn it down to the stone he was holding on to. I did not want that version. My 4 men did not carry me out of anything so that I could learn to burn down my own boy. But I did not let it be nothing either. I sat down across from him at the counter, and I told him the 2 things that had to be true from then on. "I will come to Sunday dinner," I said, "as long as I am wanted there as I am. Not as maintenance, not as a bit, as your father, and I am done performing for anybody. If you want me in your life, you get the whole man, the war and the wrench, or you get none of it. Those are the terms." "Yes," he said. "Yes, God, Dad, yes." "Then we're all right," I said, "or we will be." The door was open. I did not slam it. My whole life I have believed that the measure of a man is not what he can tear down, but what he refuses to, when tearing it down is right there in his hand. Fall came on the way it does here, slow and then all at once. Brett did the work. I will give him that, and it matters, because talk is cheap, and my son had always been rich in talk. This was different. He drove down to Corley on a Tuesday unannounced, and he found me at the VA in the next county over, where I go on Tuesdays to sit with the young ones, the ones who came back from newer wars carrying newer versions of the same old thing. I never told my family I did that. It was not a secret exactly. It was just mine. He stood in the doorway a long time and watched me listen to a young man who could not sleep. He did not interrupt. When we drove out to get coffee after, he was quiet, and then he said, "I read it, the citation. I found a copy. I couldn't finish it, Dad. I got about halfway and I had to stop." "Nobody finishes it the first time," I said. "I still haven't." Paige came to see me on her own once, without telling Brett. She sat at my kitchen table where the tin was, and she cried a little, and she said she had known for 2 years that something was wrong with the way we all treated me, and she had not been brave enough to say it at her own dinner table. I told her that being the one who notices is its own hard job, and that I had seen her not laugh every time, and it had meant more than she knew. She asked if she could learn Vivian's pie recipe, the one Mrs. Dietrich's pies had reminded me of for 30 years, and we spent an afternoon at the counter with flour on our hands, and it was the first thing that kitchen had felt like a family kitchen since Vivian passed. He brought Piper down the next week. He sat in the back while I introduced her to some of the young men, and I watched my son watch his daughter learn who her grandfather was. And I do not have the words for what that did to me, so I will not try to invent any. On the way home, Piper asked me the names. The four of them. I said them out loud in the truck, all four, the three who stayed and the one who came home, and she made me say them twice. "Say them again, Grandpa," she said. "I want to know them too." So I said them again. And you know, Gus was right. They did not mind the air. Brett took retired maintenance out of his own story. I know because a man at church, a stranger to me, came up and said, "Your boy tells me you're a Marine." Just like that. My boy tells me. It was a small thing, and it was not a small thing at all. At Thanksgiving, Brett introduced me to one of Paige's cousins, a young fellow neither of us knew well. He put his hand on my shoulder, and I braced for maintenance, the old reflex. But he said plainly, without a speech, "This is my dad, Wayne Boyd. He's a Marine." And then he let it be simple, which was the most grown-up thing I ever saw my son do. Gus came for Thanksgiving. He and I sat on the back step after the pie, the way we always do, two old men and 40 degrees, and he nodded at the kitchen window where the light was warm and full of my family. "How's the coffee can?" he said. "It's open," I told him. "It's on the shelf and it's open." He nodded slow. He did not say anything else. He did not have to. We are past the age of needing to say things. The blue tin sits on the shelf above the television, next to Vivian's chair, and the lid is off now. Inside, the citation and the St. Christopher and the photograph of the four young men, though the photograph spends most Sundays out of the tin these days, in Piper's small, careful hands, because she has decided the four of them belong to her too now, and she is right. I let her hold the medal once, just once in the kitchen, on a quiet afternoon. She held it in both hands the way you hold something warm, and she did not ask me any of the loud questions. She asked me the only one that mattered. "Were they your friends?" she said. "The best I ever had," I told her. "Then I'll remember them," she said, "so you don't have to do it by yourself." That is a thing an 8-year-old said to me, standing in my kitchen, and I had to turn around and look out the window over the sink for a while, at Vivian's crocuses that were long done for the year, but would come up again in the spring without anyone asking them to. I have thought a great deal this last year about the word my son threw at me across that beautiful patio. Sacrifice. He thought he knew what it meant. He thought it was the opposite of a furnace man. He did not understand that the furnace was the sacrifice too, in its own small way. 40 years of cold basements and honest bills, and never once telling a soul who I had been, so that the men who did not come home would not have to share their names with a bragging old fool. I gave that too. Quietly. It counts. I am not telling you this so you will think well of me. Truly, I am not. If there is one thing I have learned, it is that the ones who deserve the most thanks are the ones who cannot be thanked, and the rest of us are just here to carry the receipt and keep it dry. I am telling you because of a little girl who asked her grandfather if he had ever been brave and got a joke for an answer from a man who should have known better and lived years too long inside a picture that was easy instead of true. So here is what I want to say to you. If you have ever loved a quiet man or been one, if you have ever sat at a table where the smallest person there, the one in the corner, the one they seated by the window, turned out to be the one who had once carried the most. If there is somebody in your life you have never really asked, because you assumed you already knew the whole of them, ask them, while you still can. Ask your quiet father, your quiet mother, the old man who fixes your furnace, who they really were before the world sorted them into a corner. You may find you have been standing next to someone your whole life without ever once standing up. Tell me about that person in the comments. I would like to know their name. And if this story meant something to you tonight, share it with someone who needs to hear it. Someone who has been made to feel small at their own family's table. Thank you for spending this time with me. It is never too late to ask the people you love who they really are. It is never too late to stand up when they come into the room. And it is never too late to choose honor over noise, presence over pride, and the quiet, faithful caring of the ones we loved over the easy comfort of forgetting them.